The mating
You have
auction
no
was
right
held
to
in the
hold
Great
me.
Hall of Artoria.
Your defiance
It
changes
was the
nothing.
The
coldest
people
night
will
of
not
January,
stand for this.
when
They
even the
already
torches
have.
seemed to burn without warmth. Seraphine stood among the desperate women who lined the platform like wares at market. Unlike the others, she did not try to be seen. A heavy hooded cloak concealed her completely. The fabric fell past her hands, past her feet, pooling on the stone floor like a shadow made solid. Not even her breath was visible through the layers of dark wool and silk. The other women whispered among themselves, their voices carrying the brittle hope of those who had nowhere left to fall. But around Seraphine there was only silence. The crowd stared. Of course they did. What could be so terrible, they wondered, that even here among the unwanted and the discarded she had to hide? They were not wrong to wonder. Beneath the hood, Seraphine felt every eye like a physical touch against her skin. This was the end of everything. If no one chose her today, if no man was desperate enough or foolish enough to take a woman whose face he could not see, her father would be within his rights to sell her as a slave. Lord Aldrich Ashmore had made that perfectly clear the night before, standing in the doorway of the room that had been her prison for 3 years. She could still hear his voice, cold, distant, empty of anything that resembled love. Who would buy damaged goods, Seraphine? A woman accused of murder? A woman branded as a witch? He had not waited for an answer. He never did. The auctioneer's voice droned on, listing bloodlines and basic qualities with all the enthusiasm of a man selling livestock he knew to be lame. One woman wept silently, tears cutting tracks through carefully applied powder. She had been beautiful once. You could still see it in the bones of her face, in the graceful arch of her neck. But time and 3 failed betrothals had brought her here, to this platform, to this last desperate hope. Another woman stood with her chin high, defiant, despite the scar that ran from temple to jaw. A riding accident, perhaps, or something darker. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes burned with something that might have been rage, or might have been grief, or might have been both. A third stared at nothing, her expression blank, her hands curved protectively over her belly. Pregnant and abandoned, most likely. The father had run, or died, or simply decided he wanted nothing to do with the consequences of his pleasure. And then there was Seraphine, the last in the line, the one who drew the most attention precisely because she revealed nothing at all. She might have been beautiful. She might have been monstrous. That perhaps told the crowd everything they needed to know. What's wrong with that one, a merchant muttered to his companion, loud enough for the platform to hear. Must be hideous under all that fabric. Seraphine's fingers tightened around the edges of her cloak, but she did not move, did not speak. 3 years of silence had taught her that words changed nothing. The truth had not saved her when Thaddeus Kane burned to death in his chambers. It had not saved her when the magistrate looked at her with contempt and pronounced her a witch, a murderer, a creature too dangerous to walk free. It had not saved her when her own father pressed the brand to her forehead and sealed her magic away forever. So she stood in silence and waited for her fate to be decided by strangers. The great doors burst open. Every conversation died mid-word. Every head turned as one, pulled by a force that had nothing to do with sound and everything to do with power. The kind of power that made the air itself feel heavier, colder, sharper. An alpha presence rolled through the doors like the first wind of winter. The Alphaking, someone gasped. Gods above, another whispered. What is he doing here? Seraphine felt him before she saw him, felt the temperature drop, felt the way the very atmosphere seemed to contract around his presence. When she finally lifted her head, peering through the sheer veil closest to her face, she understood why the entire hall had gone silent. Lysander Frostwind walked like a man who owned not just the hall, but the very ground beneath it. He was tall, taller than any man in the room, with hair the color of winter moonlight falling past his shoulders. Rumors said he was beautiful enough to make noble ladies compose terrible poetry, and foreign princesses invent reasons to visit Artoria. But Seraphine thought beautiful was too soft a word for the sharp planes of his face, for the pale gray eyes that looked at the world with absolute coldness. Beautiful implied warmth. This man had none. Several nobles stepped back as he passed, as if distance might protect them from whatever this was, because this made no sense. None at all. Kings did not come to mating auctions. Kings, especially this king, could have empresses, could have anyone, anything. So why was he here? Lysander stopped in the center of the hall. His gaze swept over the platform, over the women who stood there with their carefully arranged hair and their desperate eyes. His expression revealed nothing. Not interest, not disgust, not even curiosity, just cold, perfect emptiness. "Continue," he said. The auctioneer fumbled for words. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your presence. I did not expect—" I said, "Continue." The command was quiet, almost gentle. But every person in that hall heard the iron beneath the silk. The auctioneer swallowed hard and turned to the first woman, the one who had been weeping. She straightened immediately, hope flaring in her eyes like a candle touched to flame. This was it. This was her chance. The king himself had come. Perhaps. Lysander's footsteps echoed on stone as he walked toward the platform. He stopped in front of the weeping woman and looked at her for a long moment. Seraphine could not see his face anymore, but she saw the woman's hope drain away like water through a sieve, saw her shoulders fall, saw her eyes fill with fresh tears. He moved on. The scarred woman received the same cold assessment, the same silence, the same rejection without words. He continued down the line, stopping at each woman just long enough to look, just long enough to see, just long enough to decide that whatever he was searching for, it was not there. And then his footsteps stopped directly in front of Seraphine. She kept her head bowed, staring at the stone beneath her hood. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was certain he could hear it. The silence stretched. One breath, two, three. No one in the hall dared to speak. She felt his gaze on her like winter frost against bare skin. "I'll take her." The words cut through the silence like a blade through silk. Clean, final, absolute. The hall erupted. Shocked whispers cascaded from noble to noble, from merchant to merchant, from servant to servant. Why would a king who could have anyone choose the white woman hiding her face? It made no sense, unless he knew something they did not, unless there was some hidden reason, some political maneuvering they could not see. Seraphine stood frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. He chose me. The thought felt impossible, felt like a dream or a nightmare or something in between that she did not have words for. Lysander turned to the auctioneer. "Make the arrangements. We will finalize the contract tomorrow." "My lord, wait." The auctioneer's voice cracked with nervousness. "Do you not wish to see what you're purchasing first?" "No." The single word silenced every question that might have followed. Lysander turned and walked toward the doors, his pale hair catching the torchlight like ice catching moonlight. He did not look back, did not hesitate, did not give any indication that he cared what Seraphine looked like beneath the hood, or whether she could speak, or whether she would make a suitable queen. He had chosen her, that was all. The doors closed behind him with a soft thud that sounded like the closing of one life and the opening of another. Seraphine stood on the platform, her hands trembling inside her cloak, and wondered if she had just been saved or condemned to something far worse than slavery. The carriage ride to the castle the next morning passed in a blur of snow-covered countryside and gray winter sky. Seraphine sat alone on the velvet seat, her hood still firmly in place, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her fingers ached. Lord Aldrich had not come to see her off. Neither had her sister Isolde. They had sent a servant with her belongings, such as they were, a few dresses, a handful of books, the small wooden box that held her mother's wedding ring, though Seraphine had not opened it in 3 years, could not bear to. Through the small window, she watched the castle grow larger on the horizon, gray stone towers piercing a pale sky, walls thick enough to withstand siege, a fortress as much as a palace. It looked cold, it looked lonely. It looked like the kind of place where a woman could disappear entirely and no one would notice or care. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door and offered his hand. Seraphine took it with trembling fingers and stepped down onto smooth stone. The castle loomed above her, impossibly large, impossibly grand. She had never seen anything like it. "This is madness," she thought. "Why would he choose me?" A guard appeared at her elbow. "If you would follow me, my lady, His Majesty is waiting." Seraphine followed him through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Thick carpets muffled her footsteps. Tapestries lined the walls, depicting battles and coronations and events she did not recognize. Servants bowed as she passed, their eyes curious but not cruel. No one sneered, no one whispered which just loud enough for her to hear. It was so different from her father's house that she felt dizzy. They stopped before a heavy wooden door. The guard knocked twice, then pushed it open. "His Majesty will see you now." Seraphine stepped inside. The room was a study, shelves lined with books, a desk covered in maps and documents, a fire burning low in the hearth despite the cold. And standing by the window, backlit by gray afternoon light, was Lysander himself. He was even taller than she remembered, When he turned to look at her, she felt the cold radiating from him like a physical force, as if winter itself lived in his bones. She dropped into a curtsy, her hood slipping forward. "Your Majesty?" "Rise." His voice matched everything else about him. Distant, controlled, empty of warmth. Seraphine straightened, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Through the layers of fabric covering her face, she could make out only the hard line of his jaw, the pale gray of his eyes as they passed over her without interest. No curiosity at all about what lay beneath her disguise. "My lord," she began, her voice barely steady, "I never meant to deceive you." "Deceive me?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "Yes." Seraphine's fingers twisted in the fabric of her cloak. "The hood. I... Before you make this marriage official, you should know why I wear it. If you would just let me explain." He raised one hand, cutting her off. "I don't need to know." The statement hung in the air between them, flat and final. Seraphine blinked. What?" Lysander turned to face her fully, his expression unchanged. "The wedding will take place in 3 days. That is all you need to concern yourself with. Please." She took a step forward. "Before you look, you have to understand the reason I wear it. If you just... I will not be looking." Silence. Seraphine stared at him, trying to make sense of the words. "Excuse me?" Lysander's pale eyes met hers through the veil. "You've hidden your face." "I assume that's because it isn't pleasing to look upon." Beneath her hood, Seraphine flinched. He was not entirely wrong, but he was not entirely right either. "My lord, wait." She stepped forward again, desperation creeping into her voice. "Before we marry, you should know the truth about me. About why I..." He moved toward the door, dismissing her with his silence. "You will be my wife." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "But other than that, I have no interest in seeing you. Ever." Seraphine stood frozen, trying to process what he had just said. No interest in seeing her. Not just now, ever. "Even if you never wish to see me," she managed, "others will. People will talk. They'll let you know what I look like. I would prefer you hear it from me before the ceremony. Before you feel betrayed." Lysander finally turned, and for the first time his eyes focused on her fully. Those cold eyes, gray as winter frost. "If you would prefer that no one ever sees you," he said slowly, "then it shall be so. You are to be queen. You will receive jewels and palaces and titles and land. Providing veils and a staff who will ensure you are never looked upon directly is no trouble at all." Seraphine could not speak. This was too good to be true. It had to be. Why would he choose her? Why would he allow her to stay hidden? He could have married a beautiful princess, someone pleasing to look upon, someone he knew, someone with a larger dowry. "If that is all," Lysander said, already pulling the door open, "I will see you at the cathedral." And then he was gone. Seraphine stood alone in the study, her mind racing. She should refuse. That was the logical choice. Go back to her father, accept her punishment, face whatever fate awaited her there. Because this strange offer from a cold king who wanted a wife he would never look at felt like a trap. But then she remembered the look in her father's eyes the last time she had seen him. Pure hatred, the kind of loathing that had burned there for years, since the day her mother died and he had been left with 2 daughters instead of the son he wanted. Since the day Seraphine's magic had manifested and proved to him what he had always suspected, that his wife had betrayed him with a wizard. Except that was a lie. Seraphine knew that now, though it had taken her years to piece together the truth. Her mother had never betrayed anyone. The magic in Seraphine's blood came from her father's line, from a grandmother she had never known, from a secret Lord Aldrich would kill to keep hidden. He would have sold her into slavery with a smile, would have watched her suffer, and called it justice. The Alphaking had looked at her with nothing. No hatred, no disgust, not even disdain, just cold indifference. And he had offered her something she had never dared hope for, permission to stay hidden. Seraphine touched the fabric at her throat, feeling the weight of the hood against her shoulders. Cold over cruelty, she thought. I'll choose cold over cruelty every time. The blind maids came that evening, 5 of them, moving with the confidence of women who navigated the world through touch and sound rather than sight. They bathed Seraphine gently in rose-scented water, their hands careful and kind. They brushed her hair until it fell in soft, dark waves down her back. They dressed her in a nightgown of silk so fine it felt like water against her skin. No one had been gentle with Seraphine in a very long time. When they left, she sat on the edge of the enormous canopied bed and waited. The room they had given her was larger than any space she had ever occupied. Tapestries on the walls, thick rugs on the floor. A fire burning in the hearth, filling the room with warmth and the scent of applewood. It felt like a dream, like something that could not possibly be real and would vanish the moment she woke. 3 soft knocks at the door made her jump. "Come in." Lysander stepped inside and Seraphine's breath caught. He had changed from his formal day clothes. The elaborate jacket was gone, leaving him in just a white shirt unlaced at the throat, the fabric loose enough to reveal the strong column of his neck. His pale hair was disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it. In the soft firelight, he looked less like a king and more like a man. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the quiet room. They were alone now. Seraphine's heart hammered as Lysander's gaze swept the room before settling on her hooded face. Even across the distance, she felt the weight of that look. "I will wear this," he said quietly. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a strip of black silk. "A blindfold. If you're worried I might see you," he continued, even accidentally. The thoughtfulness of it made Seraphine's throat tight. This cold, distant man who claimed to want nothing to do with her had thought to bring a blindfold to put her at ease. "All right," she said softly, "turn around." He did. Seraphine stood and crossed to him on trembling legs. She had to rise on her toes to reach, had to step close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his body. Up close, she could see everything the distance had hidden. The individual dark lashes resting against his cheeks, a small scar at the corner of his mouth, the sharp angle of his jaw. She tied the blindfold carefully, her fingers lingering perhaps a moment too long against his skin. He was so cold. Not just cool, but genuinely cold, as if he had been standing outside in the snow without a coat. It should not have been possible. Alphas ran hot, everyone knew that. The stronger the wolf, the hotter they burned. But Lysander felt like winter itself. "Are you ready?" His voice was soft in the darkness. Seraphine stepped back and moved to the last candle burning on the nightstand. She hesitated for just a moment, her hand hovering over the flame. This was her wedding night, the first time she would be touched by a man, the first time she would give herself to someone, knowing that after tonight, there would be no going back. She blew out the candle. Complete darkness fell over the room like a blanket. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. She could hear his breathing, steady and controlled, but she could also sense something else, a subtle shift in his scent, the winter sharpness giving way to something warmer beneath. "I can smell your nervousness," he said quietly. The words made her more nervous. Of course he could smell it. The anxiety, the anticipation, the fear and hope and need all tangled together until she could not tell one from the other. His hands rose slowly in the darkness, giving her time to pull away. When she did not move, his palms settled gently on her shoulders. His hands were large and cool against her bare skin, spanning from the curve of her shoulders toward her collarbones. But it was not just the touch, it was the care in it, the gentleness. For a long moment, he simply held her like that. His thumbs began to trace small, soothing circles against her skin, and Seraphine felt herself relax into the touch. He's being kind, she thought, even now. Slowly, Lysander's fingers slipped beneath the thin straps of her nightgown. He paused, a question in the stillness. Seraphine made a soft sound of assent. He slid the straps down with aching slowness. First one shoulder, his fingertips trailing lightly against her skin. Then the other, the same careful gentleness. The silk clung to her breast for a moment before whispering down her body, pooling around her feet with a soft sigh. Lysander's hands remained on her shoulders, neither moving nor retreating, just holding, anchoring. His scent was changing, growing richer, deeper. Something warm and masculine that made her wolf stir with interest. Seraphine reached for him with trembling hands, finding the edge of his shirt. Her fingers fumbled with the remaining buttons, clumsy with nervousness and anticipation. His skin was cool and smooth beneath her palms, stretched over solid muscle that shifted with his breathing. She explored cautiously in the darkness, mapping what she could not see. The breadth of his shoulders, the firm planes of his chest. When her hands settled over his heart, she felt it beating fast and strong. Faster than his controlled demeanor suggested. She grew bolder, her fingers tracing the ridges of his stomach, the dip of his waist. His muscles tensed beneath her touch, and she heard his breathing change, becoming rougher, more ragged. When she reached the waistband of his trousers, she hesitated, her fingers resting at the edge. "May I?" she whispered. "You may do whatever you like." The way he said it, rough and low, made her heart skip. She pushed the fabric down with fumbling hands. Lysander caught her wrist gently, stilling her exploration. He lifted her fingers to his mouth and kissed them, one by one, his lips cold and soft against her skin. Then his hand came up to cup her face, his palm cool against her flushed cheek. His thumb brushed over her lower lip. His fingers moved to trace her cheekbone, exploring. Seraphine felt him pause, his sense shifting, confusion bleeding through. "What is it?" she asked nervously. "Nothing, I just thought—" He trailed off, his fingers continuing their exploration of her face. When they moved higher toward her forehead, panic flared. He was trying to picture her features through touch, trying to understand what she looked like. And if his fingers reached the brand on her forehead, the cross-shaped scar that marked her as a dangerous witch whose magic had been bound. Seraphine caught his wrist, stopping him. Instead of speaking, she guided his hand downward, pressing his palm against her collarbone, just above her breasts. Lysander went completely still. Slowly giving her every chance to stop him, his fingers began to move, tracing along her collarbone with feather-light touches that made her shiver. Then lower. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever imagined. His hand was cool against her heated skin, and the contrast sent sparks racing through her that she had no words for. A small sound escaped her throat. Surprise and pleasure mixed. She felt Lysander's answering reaction, a slight tremor in his hand, a hitch in his breathing, his scent deepening into something rich and heady that made her knees weak. His other hand found her waist. Then both hands began to explore with increasing confidence. The curve of her ribs, the dip of her waist, the flare of her hips. When his palm pressed against the small of her back, pulling her closer, Seraphine startled at the coldness of his skin against hers. "I'm going to kiss you now," Lysander murmured. Seraphine barely had time to process the words before his mouth found hers. The sensation overwhelmed every thought. His lips were cool but soft, moving against hers with careful patience. Her first kiss, and it was everything and nothing like she had imagined, sweet and overwhelming and perfect. Seraphine's hands found his shoulders, gripping them for balance. She stepped closer without thinking, wanting to be nearer to him, and the moment their bare bodies pressed together, they both gasped, his chest against her breasts, his stomach against hers. The contrast in temperature created sensations she had never imagined possible. The kiss deepened, became less careful, more urgent. His hand in her hair tightened, tilting her head to a better angle. Something was building inside her, a warmth, a need she did not understand but felt with every fiber of her being. Lysander lifted her easily, carrying her across the room. When they reached the bed, he laid her down with such care, as if she were something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. Then his body covered hers and Seraphine forgot how to breathe. The solid press of his body, the way he surrounded her completely, covered her, protected her even as he possessed her. It was overwhelming. When his lips found the sensitive skin of her neck, she made a sound that surprised her, breathy and wanting. His mouth worked at her neck, kissing, sucking, his teeth grazing lightly. And with each touch, his scent grew stronger, darker, more intoxicating. There was a moment of discomfort that made her tense, made her fingers dig into his shoulders. But Lysander stilled immediately, his forehead resting against hers. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe for me." Seraphine forced herself to breathe, and slowly the discomfort faded, replaced by something else, a fullness, a connection that went beyond the physical. They found their rhythm together, and Seraphine understood for the first time what it meant to be truly connected to another person. Not just bodies joining, but something deeper. Something that felt like it might break her open and remake her all at once. Lysander's breathing grew more ragged, his movements less controlled. "You're so warm," he said, sounding almost overwhelmed. "I'm sorry, is it too much?" "No," the word came out as a gasp. "It's good, so good." They lay tangled together in the darkness afterward, both trembling, both breathing hard. His arm was wrapped around her, holding her close. For a long moment, neither moved, just breathed together in the darkness, hearts racing in sync. Then Seraphine felt him shift, heard him begin to dress in the darkness. But instead of leaving immediately, his footsteps approached the bed again. He found her hand in the darkness and lifted it to his lips, kissed her knuckles slowly, each one a gentle press of cool lips against warm skin. "Thank you," he murmured, "for tonight." The tenderness in his voice made her throat tight. Then reluctantly, he released her hand and left. Seraphine lay in the darkness, her hand still tingling from his kiss, and wondered how she was supposed to protect her heart from a man who claimed he would never love her, but touched her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Lysander came to her chambers every night after sunset. Sometimes he arrived while she was still reading by the fire. Sometimes she was already in bed, waiting for him. He never spoke of love, never promised her anything beyond what the contract stated. But his body told a different story. He learned what made her gasp. What made her arch into his touch? What made her cry out his name into the darkness? And she learned him in return. Learned the places where his control cracked. Learned the sounds he made when pleasure overwhelmed him. Learned that beneath the cold exterior was a man who craved touch and warmth and connection as desperately as she did. During the day, Seraphine explored the castle. She found the library, a vast room filled with more books than she had ever seen, and spent hours reading. She walked the gardens, though it was winter and everything was covered in snow. She sat by windows and watched the kingdom beyond the castle walls, this place that was now her home. The servants treated her with respect. The guards bowed when she passed. No one demanded to see her face. No one called her witch or murderer or monster. It was enough, she told herself. Being safe was enough. Being treated with basic human decency was more than she had dared hope for. She needed to stop wanting more. But every night when Lysander came to her chambers, when he touched her with such careful reverence, when he held her afterward like she was something precious, it became harder and harder to remember that this was just a contract, just an arrangement, just two people using each other for their own purposes. It became harder to remember that he had chosen her specifically because he thought he could never love her. 5 weeks after the wedding, Isolde came to visit. Seraphine was in the library when a servant announced her sister's arrival. For a moment, she considered refusing to see her. What was there to say? Isolde had made her feelings clear 3 years ago when she stood in the courtroom and testified against Seraphine, when she called her sister a witch, a murderer, a creature too dangerous to walk free. But curiosity won out over hurt. She met Isolde in one of the smaller sitting rooms, a space with tall windows overlooking the snow-covered gardens. Her sister stood by the window, dressed in a gown of pale blue that brought out the color of her eyes. She was as beautiful as ever, with golden hair and delicate features and the kind of grace that made people stop and stare. Seraphine had forgotten how much they looked alike. Before the brand, before the hood. "We need to talk," Isolde said quietly. Seraphine closed the door behind her and moved to the chair farthest from her sister. "Very well. Talk." Isolde turned from the window, and for the first time Seraphine saw the dark circles under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and old pain. "You can still refuse him," Isolde said. "The marriage can still be annulled. You haven't been crowned yet. You could—" "Why would I?" Seraphine kept her voice level, calm. Her sister's hands clenched at her sides. "Because when he discovers what you are, he'll destroy you. He already knows I'm a witch, that I was accused of murder. He chose me anyway." Isolde shook her head. "You don't understand. The king. There are things about him, things people whisper. He's not like other alphas. There's something wrong with him." Seraphine felt a flicker of defensiveness rise in her chest. "There's nothing wrong with him. He's cold," Isolde said flatly. "Unnaturally cold. People say he's cursed. That his whole bloodline is cursed. That's why there are no Frostwind princes or princesses. That's why every king dies young." Silence. Seraphine stared at her sister, the words settling over her like snow. She thought of Lysander's cold skin, the way he always seemed to radiate winter, the way he had flinched when she asked about it, had changed the subject, had made it clear he did not want to discuss it. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm trying to protect you." Isolde took a step forward. "I know you hate me. I know you have every right to, but you're still my sister and I don't want to see you hurt. Now you care about protecting me?" The words came out sharper than Seraphine intended. "Where were you 3 years ago when I needed you? Where were you when Father branded me? When the magistrate called me a murderer and no one spoke up for me?" Isolde's face crumpled. "I thought you did it. I thought you killed Thaddeus because he was leaving you for me. And now I don't know what to think anymore." Her sister's voice broke and Seraphine saw tears gathering in her eyes, real tears. Not the practiced, delicate crying that Isolde had perfected as a girl to get what she wanted from their father. This was raw, genuine. "Why are you really here, Isolde?" Her sister sank into a chair, her perfect posture finally breaking. "Because Father is planning something. I don't know what, but he's been meeting with people, important people. And he keeps talking about you, about how you don't deserve to be queen, about how the king will regret choosing you." Seraphine's blood went cold. "What kind of people?" "I don't know," she wiped at her eyes. "He won't tell me, but Seraphine, please be careful. Whatever Father is planning, it won't be good." They sat in silence for a long moment, two sisters who had once been close, who had once shared secrets and dreams, now separated by 3 years of pain and accusations and lies. Finally, Isolde stood. I should go, but please think about what I said. The king may seem kind now, but when he discovers the full truth, he won't, Seraphine said quietly, because I'm never taking off this hood. Her sister looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been grief. Then she left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Seraphine sat alone in the sitting room as snow began to fall outside the window. She thought about curses and cold skin and kings who died young. She thought about her father planning something in the shadows. She thought about Lysander's hands on her skin in the darkness, gentle and careful and achingly cold. And she wondered how much time they had before everything fell apart. That night, Lysander came to her chambers earlier than usual. Seraphine was still by the fire, a book forgotten in her lap, when she heard his knock. "Come in," she called. He stepped inside, and even through her veil, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Lysander closed the door and leaned against it, his eyes closing briefly. "Just a long day. Council meetings, trade negotiations, the usual tedium of ruling." Seraphine set her book aside and stood. "Would you like some wine? Or I could have the servants bring food." "No." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "I just wanted to see you." The words were simple, but they landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples outward that she could not control. He crossed the room to her, and when he reached her, he simply pulled her into his arms. Not for passion, not for pleasure, just to hold her. Seraphine wrapped her arms around him and rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. He was so cold, even through the layers of their clothing. But she did not pull away. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, just holding each other as the fire crackled and the snow fell outside. Finally, Lysander spoke, his voice muffled against her hair. "Tell me something about yourself. Something real." Seraphine hesitated. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything." His arms tightened around her. "I realize we've been married for weeks, and I know almost nothing about you except that you like to read, and you're afraid for me to see your face." "I'm afraid of more than that," she said quietly. "Tell me." She took a breath. "I'm afraid that when you know the truth about me, you'll hate me, that you'll send me away, that you'll regret ever choosing me." Lysander pulled back just enough to tilt her face up toward his, even though he could not see it through the veil. "I chose you knowing you were hiding something, knowing you had been accused of terrible things. I chose you anyway." Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why did you choose me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then so softly she almost missed it, he said, "Because I thought I could never love someone I couldn't see. I thought it would keep me safe." Seraphine's breath caught. Safe from what? But Lysander just shook his head and pulled her close again, and she knew he would not answer. Not tonight. They made love slowly that night with a tenderness that felt different from before. Less desperate, more intimate, as if something had shifted between them, some wall had begun to crack. Afterward, Lysander did not leave immediately. He lay beside her in the darkness, his arm around her waist, his breathing slow and even. "Are you staying?" Seraphine asked softly. "For a while," he said, "if that's all right." More than all right. She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in 3 years. When she woke in the morning, he was gone. But the pillow beside her was still cold from where he had lain, and that simple evidence of his presence made her smile. 2 weeks later, Seraphine missed her monthly bleeding. She tried to tell herself it meant nothing. Stress could delay such things. The upheaval of her life, the move to the castle, the new marriage, all of that could affect her body. But when another week passed with no sign, she went to see the healer. The woman examined her carefully, asked questions, made notes. Finally, she looked up with a gentle smile. "You're with child, my lady. About 6 weeks along, I'd say." Seraphine sat frozen on the examination table, trying to process the words. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Lysander's baby. The healer continued talking, giving instructions about what to eat and what to avoid, and about rest and exercise and when to come back for another examination. Seraphine heard none of it. Her mind was spinning, her heart racing. A baby meant everything would change. According to their contract, once she gave him an heir, their physical relationship would end. He would have what he needed from her. He would stop coming to her chambers. She would lose him. The thought sent a spike of pain through her chest so sharp it stole her breath. When had this happened? When had she started to care so much? When had cold indifference stopped being enough? When had she fallen in love with her husband? That night, Seraphine waited for Lysander in her chambers, her hands trembling, her heart in her throat. She had to tell him. He deserved to know, but she was terrified of what would happen after. He arrived as the sun was setting, his pale hair catching the last rays of golden light through the window. "You wanted to see me?" he said, and there was something in his voice. Worry, perhaps, or hope. She could not tell. Seraphine stood, her hands clasped in front of her. "I have news." He went very still. "What kind of news?" She took a breath, forced herself to say the words. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Lysander stared at her, and even through the veil she could see his expression shift. Shock. Then something else. Something that looked almost like joy. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "You're certain?" His voice was rough. "Yes," the healer confirmed it today. For a long moment he said nothing, just held her, his hand warm against her belly through the fabric of her dress. "Thank you," he finally murmured against her hair. "Thank you for this gift." Seraphine felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to tell him, wanted to say that she loved him, that this baby was more than just an heir, that she did not want their relationship to end just because she had fulfilled her duty. But she was afraid, afraid of rejection, afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing had grown between them. So she just held him back and tried to memorize this moment. His arms around her, his hand on her belly, his scent surrounding her, because she knew it could not last. And then Lysander pulled back slightly, tilting her face up toward his, even though he could not see it through the veil. His thumb traced her cheekbone through the fabric. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "What is it?" He hesitated, and she felt his whole body tense. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrible and impossible. Seraphine's heart soared, then plummeted. Because the moment he said it, Lysander's entire body convulsed. His hand flew to his chest, clutching at his heart. His face went white as snow, whiter than she had ever seen it. "Lysander," she gasped. "What's wrong?" He tried to speak, but no words came out. His knees buckled. He collapsed into her arms, and she went down with him, both of them hitting the floor hard. Lysander, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with pain. His left hand was pale, frost spreading up his wrist like ice creeping across a window. "Help!" Seraphine screamed. "Someone help us! The king is dying!" But even as the servants came running, even as chaos erupted around them, Lysander's eyes found hers through the veil. "I love you," he whispered again. "Even if it kills me, I love you." And then his eyes closed, and he went limp in her arms, and Seraphine felt her entire world shatter like glass. The healers worked through the night. Seraphine sat beside Lysander's bed, her hand wrapped around his, feeling the unnatural cold seeping deeper into his skin with every passing hour. The frost had spread from his left hand up to his elbow, pale blue and crystalline, beautiful in the way that winter was beautiful, deadly in the way that winter was deadly. She had not left his side, had not eaten, had not slept. The servants brought food that went untouched. The fire in the hearth burned high and hot, but it did nothing to warm the room, did nothing to chase away the ice creeping through her husband's veins. Outside the window, dawn broke over the kingdom, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The 4th day of April, 4 days since Lysander had collapsed in her arms, 4 days since he had said the words that were killing him. "I love you." The head healer, a woman named Marta with silver hair and kind eyes, checked Lysander's pulse for what felt like the 100th time. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but Seraphine saw the worry in the lines around her mouth. "How long does he have?" Seraphine asked. Her voice was hoarse from hours of begging the gods for mercy. Marta hesitated. "My lady, I cannot say for certain. The ice is spreading slowly, but it is spreading. If it reaches his heart..." She did not need to finish the sentence. "There must be something," Seraphine said. "Some treatment, some medicine, anything." The healer's expression softened with pity. "This is not a sickness I recognize. This is something else, something beyond my skill." "Then find someone whose skill is not beyond it." Seraphine's voice was steady now, steel beneath the exhaustion. "Send for every healer in the kingdom, every physician, every wise woman. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who we have to summon. Find someone who can help him." Marta bowed her head. "Yes, my lady." After the healer left, Seraphine turned back to Lysander. His face was peaceful in sleep, almost serene. But the frost glittering on his arm told a different story. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched the edge of it. It was so cold it burned. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." His eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they were unfocused, confused. Then they found her hooded face, and something like relief washed over his features. Seraphine. Her name on his lips made her throat tight. "I'm here. I'm right here." He tried to sit up, but she pressed a hand gently to his chest. "Don't. You need to rest." "How long have I been?" 4 days. Lysander closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. 4 days. The ice has spread that much in 4 days. "What is this?" Seraphine demanded. "What's happening to you?" He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then slowly, painfully, he began to speak. "It's a curse on my bloodline, on every king of the Frostwind line. Tell me." His gray eyes met hers through the veil. "My ancestor, generations ago, was a king who believed that love made men weak. He wanted to ensure that the rulers of Frostwind would never be swayed by emotion, never be controlled by their hearts. So he sought out a powerful witch and asked her to remove his capacity to feel love." Seraphine's blood ran cold. "The witch agreed," Lysander continued. "But she was cruel. She did not simply remove his ability to love. She cursed him and every male heir that would follow. We can feel love. We can fall in love. But the moment we do, the moment we speak those words aloud, our hearts begin to freeze. The ice spreads until it reaches the heart itself. And then we die." "No," Seraphine breathed. "No, that's not. There has to be a way to break it. My ancestor regretted it almost immediately. Realized he had been tricked. He tried to find the witch, tried to force her to undo it, but she had vanished. So he did the only thing he could think of. He blamed all witches for his mistake, banned witchcraft throughout the kingdom, made it a crime punishable by death. The pieces were falling into place now. The hatred of witches, the brand on Seraphine's forehead, the reason magic had been forbidden for so long. "And every king since?" she asked. "Every king who has ever fallen in love has died young," Lysander said. "My father lasted until I was 12 before my mother's kindness broke through his defenses. My grandfather made it to 30 before he loved a servant girl. My great-grandfather died at 25. Seraphine's hand tightened on his. "You knew this. You knew loving anyone would kill you." "Yes. And you chose me because you thought—" "I thought I could never love someone I could not see," he finished quietly. "I thought if I never looked at your face, never knew you fully, I could keep my heart safe. But I was wrong. I fell in love with your voice, your kindness, the way you laugh when you think no one is listening, the way you touch me in the darkness like I'm something precious instead of something cold and broken." His fingers were ice cold against her skin. "I fell in love with you, Seraphine, and I have no regrets. Even knowing it's killing me, I would choose to love you again." Seraphine's throat closed with emotion, but she forced herself not to cry. There would be time for tears later. Now she needed to be strong. "I won't let you die," she said, and there was steel in her voice now, cutting through the grief. "There has to be a way to break this curse." "Lysander." His hand tightened on hers. "The curse has held for generations. Stronger men than me have tried to break it. Wiser men, richer men. None have succeeded. Then I'll be the first." She stood, her decision made. If a witch created this curse, then a witch can break it. And I will find one who can. Lysander started to protest, but she silenced him with a gentle hand on his cheek. "Rest," she commanded. "Save your strength. I will fix this." She swept from the room before he could argue, before her resolve could waver. Outside in the corridor, she found Marta waiting. "Send word to the council," Seraphine said. "I want every witch in the kingdom found and brought here. I want scholars who study curses. I want anyone who might have knowledge of how to break dark magic." "Do it now," Marta bowed. "Yes, my lady." As the healer hurried away, Seraphine leaned against the wall and pressed her hand to her stomach. She could not feel the baby yet, not at 6 weeks, but she knew it was there, knew that her child deserved to know their father, deserved to have a father who was alive and whole and present. "I will save him," she whispered to the life growing inside her. The 5th of May brought rain and a visitor. Seraphine was in the library, surrounded by stacks of books on curses and dark magic and ancient spells, when a servant knocked on the door. "My lady, there is a woman here to see you. She says she can help the king." Seraphine was on her feet immediately. "Send her in." The woman who entered was old, impossibly old, with white hair that fell past her waist and eyes the color of moss. She walked with a carved wooden staff, her movements slow but steady. When she looked at Seraphine, those green eyes seemed to see straight through the veil, straight through skin and bone, straight to the truth beneath. I am Esme, the woman said. I believe I can help your husband. Seraphine gestured to a chair. Please sit. Tell me what you know. Esme settled into the chair with a soft sigh, her staff resting against her knee. I know that the king suffers from the Frostwind curse. I know that ice is spreading through his veins, and I know that conventional healing will do nothing to stop it. Can you break the curse? Esme's expression was grave. Breaking the curse itself would require power beyond my ability. But there is another way. Ice can be countered by fire. Seraphine's heart leaped. Fire magic? Fire elemental magic specifically, Esme confirmed. The purest form, the kind that comes from the soul itself, not learned but born into the blood. Hope and despair warred in Seraphine's chest. She knew of one fire witch, herself. But her magic had been bound 3 years ago. The seal on her forehead prevented her from accessing even the smallest spark. I know a fire witch, Seraphine said carefully, but her magic is sealed. Esme's eyes sharpened. By whom? By her father. By the one who wielded the magic to create the seal. Then only he can break it. Seraphine stood and walked to the window, her hands clenched into fists. That will be difficult. Esme was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, You are the fire witch, are you not? Seraphine turned, startled. How did you? I can sense it. Even sealed magic leaves traces. And yours burns bright, child, bright enough to save the king. But first we must convince your father to release you. He won't, Seraphine said flatly. He hates me. He believes I killed a man. He would rather let me suffer than lift the seal. Perhaps, Esme stood leaning heavily on her staff. But even the coldest hearts can be moved by the right leverage. You are a queen now, child. You have power. Use it. The journey to Ashmore Manor took 3 days. Seraphine traveled with a full guard, with Esme at her side, with a determination burning in her chest that felt almost like the fire magic she had lost. The manor looked exactly as she remembered. Gray stone walls, narrow windows, gardens that had once been her mother's pride, now overgrown and neglected. She had not been here since the day of her trial, the day her father had pressed the brand to her forehead and sealed away her magic forever. Lord Aldrich Ashmore met them in the great hall. He looked older than Seraphine remembered, his hair more gray, his face more lined. But his eyes were the same, cold, distant, filled with contempt when they fell on her hooded figure. So, he said, the little queen returns. Seraphine kept her voice level. Father, what do you want? I need you to break my seal. Aldrich's laugh was harsh and bitter. After all this time, you dare come here and ask that of me? My husband is dying, Seraphine said. The only thing that can save him is fire magic. My fire magic. You will break the seal, or I will have you arrested for refusing a direct order from your queen. Her father's expression darkened. You cannot threaten me, girl. I am still your father. And I am still accused of a murder I did not commit, Seraphine shot back. A murder that happened while my magic was sealed. A murder I could not possibly have committed with fire, since I had no access to fire. The hall went very quiet. Aldrich's jaw clenched. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that whoever killed Thaddeus Kane had to have fire magic. Real, unsealed fire magic. And since I was already bound at the time of his death, it could not have been me. Esme stepped forward, her green eyes fixed on Aldrich. Is that true, my lord? Was the girl's magic sealed before the death occurred? Aldrich's hands clenched at his sides. Yes, but that doesn't mean... Then who did kill him? Seraphine demanded. Who else in our family has fire magic? Her father went very still. Seraphine took a step forward. You did, didn't you? You killed Thaddeus? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Aldrich's face had gone white. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me, Seraphine said. Her voice was shaking now, but she pushed on. Explain why a man died of magical fire when the only accused witch had been sealed for months. Explain why you were so quick to blame me. Explain why you branded your own daughter and let everyone believe she was a murderer. Her father's composure cracked. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. It was for your protection, he said finally. His voice was rough, broken. Seraphine stared at him. What? Thaddeus discovered the truth about our family, about the magic in our bloodline. He was going to expose us, going to tell the kingdom that the Ashmore family carried witch blood, that I carried it, that you carried it. He was going to destroy everything. So you killed him. I had no choice. Aldrich spun around, and for the first time, Seraphine saw emotion in his eyes, real emotion, fear and desperation, and something that might have been grief. He was going to ruin us, ruin you and Isolde. I killed him to protect you. And then you blamed me. Seraphine said quietly. You let everyone believe I was a murderer. You branded me. You sealed my magic. You called me a monster. Because the alternative was admitting that I had magic, her father said. Admitting that I was the murderer. I thought if I sealed your magic, if I made you the villain, it would protect the family name. It would protect Isolde. It was Isolde he wanted to marry, Seraphine said, not me. Aldrich flinched. Yes, you destroyed my life to protect her future. I destroyed your life to protect all of us, he corrected. But his voice lacked conviction. Seraphine felt anger surge through her, hot and bright. But she forced herself to remain calm. Break the seal, she said, now. Aldrich shook his head. I can't. If I break it, your magic will be uncontrolled. Wild. You could hurt people. You could hurt yourself. I am willing to take that risk. I am not. Then you leave me no choice. Seraphine turned to the guards. Arrest Lord Aldrich Ashmore for the murder of Thaddeus Kane and for conspiracy to conceal the crime. The guards moved forward immediately. Aldrich stumbled back, shock written across his face. You can't do this. I am your queen, Seraphine said coldly. I can do whatever is necessary to save my husband and protect my kingdom. You will break the seal, or you will rot in a cell until you change your mind. Wait, the voice came from the doorway. Seraphine turned to see Isolde standing there, her face pale, her eyes wide. Isolde, Aldrich said, thank the gods. Tell her she's making a mistake. But Isolde was not looking at their father. She was looking at Seraphine, tears streaming down her face. It's true, isn't it, Isolde whispered. Everything she said. You killed Thaddeus. You let everyone blame Seraphine. Aldrich opened his mouth, but no words came out. Isolde walked into the hall on unsteady legs. I testified against her. I stood in that courtroom and called my own sister a murderer. I believed you when you said she had done it. I believed you when you said she was dangerous. She turned to Seraphine, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Seraphine stared at her sister, at the genuine anguish in her eyes, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to it. Help me, she said quietly. Help me convince father to break the seal. Isolde wiped at her tears and turned to Aldrich. Their father looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his secrets. You have to make this right, Isolde said. Please, father, for once in your life, do the right thing. But Aldrich shook his head. I can't, I won't, even to save the king, even to save your daughter's husband. Especially not for that, Aldrich spat. Let the cursed Frostwind line die out. Let them all burn for what they did to witches, for what they did to my mother. Seraphine's breath caught. Your mother? Esme stepped forward, her voice soft. Isabel, she said. Your mother was Isabel Ashmore, was she not? Aldrich's face twisted with old pain. Yes, she was my mother, and the Frostwinds had her killed for being a witch. Executed her in the town square while I watched. I was 8 years old. Understanding crashed over Seraphine like a wave. Your mother was a witch. That's where the magic comes from. Not from my mother at all. No, Aldrich said quietly. Your mother was innocent. I let everyone believe she had been unfaithful because it was easier than admitting the truth, that I carried witch blood, that my own mother had been executed for the crime of existing. He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. I have spent my entire life hiding what I am, hiding what you are, and you want me to expose us now? To break the seal and let the world see that the Ashmore family carries the very magic the crown has forbidden? No one has to know, Seraphine said. Break the seal in private. Let me save my husband, and then we can decide what to do about the rest. Aldrich looked at her for a long moment, then at Isolde, then at Esme, who stood watching with those ancient, knowing eyes. Finally, he stood. Bring me the seal. 1 week later, they performed the ritual in the dungeons beneath Ashmore Manor. Seraphine knelt on cold stone while Esme drew symbols around her in chalk and salt. Aldrich stood to one side, his face pale, his hands trembling. Isolde stood on the other, her presence a quiet support. This will hurt, Esme warned. When the seal breaks, the magic will flood back all at once. You must be ready to control it, or it will control you. Seraphine nodded. Her whole body was tense, braced for pain. Aldrich stepped forward. He held a small silver knife, its blade gleaming in the torchlight. To break the seal, he would need to cut into it, to let blood flow over the brand on her forehead while speaking the words of release. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Once this is done, it cannot be undone. I'm certain. He hesitated. Then, I'm sorry for everything. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I only hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Seraphine met her father's eyes through her veil. Save your apologies until after you've saved my husband. Aldrich nodded, then he raised the knife. The ritual took 3 hours. 3 hours of chanting in a language Seraphine did not recognize. 3 hours of her father's blood mixing with her own, dripping onto the brand, while Esme wove magic through the air, like thread through a loom. And then all at once, the seal shattered. Seraphine screamed as fire exploded from her body. Real fire, bright and hot and utterly uncontrolled. It roared up from her hands, from her skin, from the very core of her being. The chalk circle ignited. The stone walls glowed red with heat. Control it, Esme commanded. Think of your husband. Think of your child. Let your love be the anchor. Seraphine thought of Lysander lying in that bed, frost creeping toward his heart. She thought of the baby growing inside her, innocent, imperfect, and deserving of a father. She thought of love and hope, and all the reasons she needed to survive this. The fire responded. Slowly, painfully, it began to obey. The flames pulled back, condensing, focusing. Seraphine held out her hands and watched fire dance between her fingers, beautiful and deadly, and finally hers to command. When the last ember faded, she collapsed onto the stone, exhausted. Isolde rushed forward to catch her. It's done, Esme said softly. The seal is broken. Now we can save your king. They rode through the night, Seraphine's urgency pushing them faster than was safe. Every moment that passed was a moment Lysander grew weaker. Every hour was another inch of ice spreading through his veins. It was the 1st of August when they arrived back at the castle. Seraphine stumbled through the corridors, her body aching with exhaustion, her magic still humming beneath her skin like a living thing. Lysander's room was dim when she entered. The healers had drawn back, knowing there was nothing more they could do. He lay on the bed, so still he might have been carved from ice himself. The frost had spread to his shoulder now, creeping toward his neck, toward his heart. Seraphine pulled off her gloves with shaking hands. She could do this, Esme had taught her. All she needed was to focus the fire, to let it flow gently, to melt the ice without burning the flesh beneath. She placed her bare hands on Lysander's chest. The heat flowed from her palms, golden and warm. She felt the ice resist at first, felt it fight against the warmth. But slowly, gradually, it began to melt. Water droplets formed on Lysander's skin, running down his chest like tears. The frost on his arm began to recede, from his shoulder to his elbow, from his elbow to his wrist, from his wrist to his hand. Seraphine poured everything she had into it, all her love, all her hope, all her desperation. The fire responded, burning brighter, hotter, but never out of control. Never more than Lysander could bear. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the ice melted away. Seraphine collapsed forward, her head resting on Lysander's chest. She could hear his heart beating, steady, strong, alive. But he did not wake. Days passed, then a week. Lysander breathed, his heart beat, but his eyes remained closed. The healers could find nothing wrong, but he would not wake. Seraphine sat beside his bed, one hand on her growing belly, the other holding his. She was 4 months pregnant now, her body changing, her child making their presence known with small flutters of movement. Please wake up, she whispered. Our baby needs you. I need you. But there was no response. On the 15th of August, Esme came to her with news. Your mother, she said gently. Your mother is alive. Seraphine stared at her. That's impossible. My mother died when I was 3 years old. Esme shook her head. Your father sent her away, forced her to leave to protect the family secret. But she never stopped watching over you. She lives not far from here, in a cottage by the woods. She has been waiting for 20 years for the chance to see you again. Seraphine's world tilted. My mother is alive? The woman Esme brought to the castle 3 days later had dark hair threaded with silver and eyes the same shade as Seraphine's own. She was thin, worn by years of hard living, but when she saw Seraphine, her face transformed with joy and grief and desperate love. My baby, Celestine Ashmore whispered. My sweet baby girl. Seraphine stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. This was her mother, the woman she had mourned for 20 years, the woman she had dreamed about, cried for, longed for with every fiber of her being. Celestine crossed the room and pulled Seraphine into her arms, and Seraphine finally let the tears come. All the years of loneliness, all the pain, all the fear poured out. I thought you were dead, she gasped. I thought you left me. Never, Celestine said fiercely. I never left you. Your father forced me to go, but I never stopped watching. Never stopped loving you. You were always in my heart. They held each other for a long time. Mother and daughter reunited after 2 decades apart. Finally, Seraphine pulled back. She needed to ask the question burning in her chest. Did you know? About father? About what he did? Celestine's expression darkened. I suspected. When I heard about Thaddeus's death, I knew. Aldrich was always capable of terrible things when cornered. But I had no proof. No way to help you. She cupped Seraphine's veiled face in her hands. But now I'm here, and I will help you with whatever you need. Starting with controlling your fire magic properly. Over the next 2 weeks, Celestine taught Seraphine everything she had never learned. How to call fire without anger. How to shape it, mold it, use it for healing as well as destruction. How to let it be an extension of her will rather than a wild force. Seraphine practiced for hours each day, fire dancing between her fingers, responding to her thoughts like a loyal companion. And with each day, her control grew stronger, but Lysander still did not wake. On the 20th of September, Seraphine went into labor. The pain hit her like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. She had been sitting beside Lysander's bed, reading to him from one of his favorite books. When the first contraction seized her, the healers came running. Celestine was there, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. Isolde stood in the corner, her face pale with worry and something that looked like longing. The labor lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of agony and fear and desperate hope. And finally, just as the sun rose on the 21st of September, a baby's cry filled the room. It's a boy, Marta said, placing the squalling infant on Seraphine's chest. A healthy, perfect boy. Seraphine looked down at her son. He was beautiful, tiny and red and perfect, with a shock of pale hair that reminded her of Lysander. Alaric, she whispered. His name is Alaric. The baby's cries softened as he felt his mother's heartbeat, felt her warmth, and Seraphine felt her heart crack open with love so fierce it stole her breath. This was her son, hers and Lysander's. A child born of a love that had defied curses and contracts and every obstacle placed in their path. But Lysander was not there to see him, was not there to hold his son for the first time. Seraphine looked over at her husband's still form on the bed across the room. The healers had moved him here so he could be near her during the birth, though he could not wait to witness it. Your father is going to love you, she told Alaric softly. He's going to be so proud. He just needs to wake up first. The baby yawned, a tiny sound that made everyone in the room smile despite their worry. Celestine leaned over to kiss her daughter's forehead. You did beautifully, she said. Now rest, heal, build your strength. Because Seraphine knew what came next. Knew that breaking the curse on Lysander would require more than just melting ice. It would require something deeper. Something she was not sure she was ready to give. But for her son, for her husband, for the family they could be, she would do anything. Even if it meant finally removing her veil and facing the world without shame. October arrived with frost on the windows and gold in the trees. Baby Alaric was 3 weeks old, sleeping in a cradle beside his mother's bed, while Seraphine sat vigil over her husband. Lysander had been unconscious for nearly 2 months now. The ice was gone, melted away by her fire, but still he did not wake. The healers had no answers. His body was healthy, his heart beat strong and steady, but it was as if some essential part of him remained frozen, trapped somewhere Seraphine could not reach. She sat in the chair between their beds, one hand rocking Alaric's cradle, the other holding Lysander's fingers. The firelight played across her husband's face, making him look almost alive, almost present, but his eyes stayed closed. Esme came to visit on the first day of October. The old woman moved slowly into the room, her staff tapping against the stone floor. She stood for a long moment, studying Lysander with those ancient green eyes. The ice is gone, she said finally. But the curse remains. Seraphine looked up sharply. What do you mean? I melted the ice. I saved him. You saved his body, Esme corrected gently. But the curse on the frostwind line runs deeper than ice in the veins. It is woven into the very fabric of his bloodline, into his soul. Then how do I break it? Esme was quiet for a moment, her gaze moving from Lysander to baby Alaric, sleeping peacefully in his cradle. The curse was born of a rejection of love. It can only be broken by the acceptance of it. Complete acceptance, without reservation, without fear. I accept him, Seraphine said. I love him. I've told him of that. But he has not accepted himself, Esme said. He still believes that his love is poison, that loving you will kill him. Until he believes otherwise, until he truly accepts that love can save, rather than destroy, the curse will hold him prisoner. Seraphine stood, frustration and fear warring in her chest. Then what do I do? How do I reach him if he won't wake? Show him, Esme said simply. Show him that love does not destroy. Show him acceptance without conditions. Show him every part of yourself, even the parts you hide. Her hand moved unconsciously to her veil. Esme saw the gesture and nodded. Yes, that is where it must begin. After Esme left, Seraphine sat in silence, her mind racing. Show him every part of herself. Remove the veil. Let him see the brand on her forehead, the mark that had defined her for 3 years, the shame she had carried like a weight around her neck. The thought terrified her. But Alaric made a small sound in his sleep, a tiny murmur that reminded her of everything at stake. Her son deserved a father. Lysander deserved to meet his child, and Seraphine deserved the chance to be loved fully, completely, without barriers between them. She looked at her husband's still face. I'll do it, she whispered. I'll show you everything. Just please, please come back to me. The next morning, Celestine found her daughter standing by the window, staring out at the frost-covered gardens. Alaric was in her arms, awake and alert, his gray eyes so like his father's, taking in the world with innocent curiosity. You're thinking about removing the veil, Celestine said. It was not a question. Seraphine nodded. Esme says it's the only way to break the curse completely. To show Lysander that love accepts everything, and you're afraid, terrified. Celestine crossed the room and placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. The brand does not define you, my darling. It never did. Everyone who sees it will know what I am, what I was accused of. Let them know, Celestine said fiercely. Let them see a woman who survived injustice. A woman who was branded for a crime she did not commit and still rose to become a queen. There is no shame in that. Seraphine looked down at Alaric. The baby gazed up at her with perfect trust, perfect love. He did not care what she looked like, did not care about scars or brands or secrets. He simply loved her because she was his mother. Perhaps that was what Lysander needed to see, that kind of unconditional acceptance. I need to go to my father first, Seraphine said quietly. There's something he needs to do. The journey to Ashmore Manor took 2 days this time. Seraphine traveled with Alaric, with Celestine, with Isolde, who had asked to come. They arrived on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with unshed rain. Aldrich was waiting in his study. He looked older than he had just 2 months ago, as if the weight of his confession had aged him years in mere weeks. When Seraphine entered carrying Alaric, her father's eyes went immediately to the baby. This is your grandson, Seraphine said, Alaric Frostwind. She crossed the room and, before she could think better of it, placed the baby in her father's arms. Aldrich held his grandson awkwardly, carefully, as if the child might break. Alaric looked up at him with wide gray eyes and made a small cooing sound, and Seraphine watched her father's face transform. The coldness melted, the distance crumbled. What remained was pure, raw emotion, wonder, joy, and beneath it all, the kind of grief that came from realizing what you had lost through your own actions. He's beautiful, Aldrich whispered. He looks like his father, Seraphine finished, who is dying because a curse that I cannot break alone. Her father's eyes met hers. What do you need? Esme says the curse requires a sacrifice to break completely. Blood magic to counter blood magic. I need someone from my bloodline to serve as an anchor while I work to free Lysander's soul from the curse. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Alaric. What does this anchor do? Bears the weight of the curse while it's being broken. Esme says it will drain the anchor's life force. They may not survive it. The room went silent. Even Alaric seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, his small face serious. I'll do it, Aldrich said. Father, no. Isolde stepped forward. There has to be another bow. But Aldrich shook his head. This is my chance to make things right. To finally, after all these years, protect my daughter instead of destroying her. He looked at Seraphine. I have done terrible things. Killed a man to protect our secret. Then blamed you for it. Let you be branded. Let you suffer. I cannot undo any of that. But I can do this. Let me do this. Seraphine felt her throat close with emotion. You could die, I know. But your son will live knowing his father. That is worth any price. Isolde was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Father, please, I just got you back. I just started to forgive you. Aldrich handed Alaric gently to Seraphine, then moved to embrace Isolde. My sweet girl, you have been the light of my life since the day you were born. But I have lived too long with the weight of my sins. Let me die doing something good, something right. We don't know that you'll die, Seraphine said, though her voice lacked conviction. Esme said it would drain your life force, but maybe. We both know the truth, Aldrich interrupted gently. This curse has held for generations. Breaking it will require everything I have to give, but I give it gladly. He turned to Celestine, who had been standing quietly by the door. I owe you an apology most of all. I forced you to leave our daughters. I made you abandon the children you loved because I was too afraid to accept what I was, too afraid to stand by you. Celestine's face was wet with tears, but she stepped forward and took his hand. I forgave you long ago, Aldrich. Bitterness would have poisoned me. I chose to let it go. Even so, he said, I am sorry for all of it. They stood like that for a moment, the family that had been broken now beginning to heal. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. When do we perform this ritual? Aldrich asked. Tomorrow, Seraphine said. We leave at dawn. They returned to the castle on the 20th of October. Esme was waiting, her ritual space already prepared in a room adjacent to Lysander's chambers. Candles formed a circle on the floor. Symbols were drawn in salt and ash. In the center lay a flat stone, dark and ancient. This is the anchor point, Esme explained. Aldrich will lie here while Seraphine works to free Lysander. The curse will flow into Aldrich instead of back into Lysander. It is the only way. How long will it take? Celestine asked, her hand tight around her husband's. As long as it must. Hours, perhaps. Esme's expression was grave. Aldrich must remain conscious and focused for as long as possible. Once he loses consciousness, the anchor will weaken. We will have only minutes after that. Aldrich nodded. I understand. Seraphine looked at her father, this man who had caused her such pain, who had destroyed her life to protect his secrets, who was now willing to die to save it. Forgiveness was not simple. It did not erase the past, but perhaps it could create a different future. Thank you, she said quietly. The ritual began at sunset. Aldrich lay on the stone, his hands folded over his chest. Isolde knelt on one side, holding his hand. Celestine knelt on the other. Seraphine stood at the head of the circle, her hands already beginning to glow with controlled fire. Baby Alaric had been given to a nursemaid, taken somewhere safe while his mother worked magic that could save or destroy. Lysander had been moved to lie within the circle, his head near Aldrich's feet. The two men, father-in-law and son-in-law, connected by the woman they both loved in different ways. Esme began to chant in that ancient language, her voice rising and falling like waves. Seraphine felt the magic respond, felt it pull at something deep within her chest. She let her fire flow out, let it weave through the air in golden threads that wrapped around Lysander like a cocoon. This was not the violent fire of destruction. This was the gentle fire of hearth and home, of warmth and safety and love. She could feel the curse inside Lysander. It was old and dark and stubborn, wrapped around his heart like frozen chains. But as her fire touched it, the ice began to crack. The curse fought back. Seraphine felt it surge, felt it try to spread, to reclaim the ground it had lost. But instead of flowing into Lysander, it flowed into Aldrich. Her father gasped, his body going rigid. Isolde cried out, but Celestine held firm, whispering words of encouragement. Stay with us, Aldrich. Stay strong. Seraphine pushed harder. The fire burned brighter, hotter. The curse screamed as it broke apart, piece by piece, shard by shard. And every piece that shattered flowed into her father instead of her husband. She could see it happening. Frost forming on Aldrich's skin, his lips turning blue, his breathing becoming labored. Father, hold on, she whispered. Just a little longer. But the curse was massive, generations of dark magic, of twisted love and fear and punishment. It did not want to die. It clawed and fought and resisted with everything it had. Aldrich's eyes began to flutter. Celestine leaned close. Remember when we met? She said urgently. Remember how you promised me the world? How we danced at our wedding until the sun came up? Remember the day Isolde was born? How you held her? Remember Seraphine's first steps? How proud you were? Aldrich's eyes focused on his wife's face. I remember, he whispered. I remember all of it. Then hold on to those memories. Hold on to love. Don't let the curse take that from you. The magic reached a crescendo. Seraphine felt the final chain around Lysander's heart shatter, felt the curse break free completely. It rushed into Aldrich like a flood, like a tidal wave of ice and darkness. Her father screamed, and then, suddenly, it was over. The fire faded, the chanting stopped. Silence filled the room. Lysander's eyes opened. He gasped, his body arching off the floor as if he had been drowning and had finally broken the surface. His hands clutched at his chest, feeling for the ice that was no longer there. Seraphine? His voice was hoarse, confused. What? Where? But Seraphine was not looking at her husband. She was looking at her father. Aldrich lay on the stone, frost covering his entire body. His lips were blue, his face white as snow. But his eyes were open, looking at Celestine with perfect clarity. Did it work? He asked, his voice barely audible. Yes, Celestine said, her voice breaking. Yes, my love, you did it. You saved him. Aldrich smiled. Then it was worth it. Isolde was crying, her shoulders shaking. Father, please, don't leave us. I know, sweet girl. Aldrich's hand found hers, squeezed weakly. But this is right. This is how it should be. I spent my life running from love, from truth. Let me die embracing it. Seraphine knelt beside him. I forgive you, for everything. You protected me in the end. That's what I'll remember. Aldrich's eyes found hers. Be happy. You and your king and your beautiful son. Be the family I never knew how to be. We will. His breathing was getting shallow now, each breath a struggle. Celestine held his hand to her cheek. I never stopped loving you, she whispered, even when you sent me away, even when I hated what you had done. I never stopped. I know, Aldrich said, and that is the greatest gift I never deserved. His eyes closed, his chest rose one final time, and then he was still. The funeral was held 3 days later. White roses covered his grave. Seraphine stood at the graveside with Isolde on one side and Celestine on the other. Lysander stood slightly behind her, one hand on her shoulder, still weak but growing stronger each day. As the priest spoke words of comfort and blessing, Seraphine thought about forgiveness. How it did not erase the past but allowed you to move forward. How her father had been both destroyer and savior, both cruel and kind. How people were complicated. How love was complicated. How forgiveness was the hardest and most necessary thing in the world. That night, after Alaric had been fed and put to bed, after the castle had grown quiet, Seraphine stood before the mirror in her chambers. Her hands trembled as they reached for the ties of her veil. Lysander sat on the bed behind her, watching. He had been patient, had not asked to see her face even now that the curse was broken. But Esme's words echoed in her mind. Complete acceptance, without reservation, without fear. She could not ask that of him if she did not offer it herself. The ties came loose. The veil slipped from her head and pooled on the floor like dark water. Seraphine looked at her reflection. At the face she had hidden for 3 years. Dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders. Her features were delicate, her eyes large and dark. She had been called beautiful once, before the brand. The scar stood out starkly against her pale skin. A cross burned into her forehead, the mark of a convicted witch. It had faded slightly in 3 years, but was still clearly visible. Still clearly damning. She heard Lysander stand, heard him cross the room to stand behind her. She could see his reflection in the mirror, could see him looking at her face for the first time. She waited for disgust, for horror, for regret. But when Lysander's hands came to rest on her shoulders, when his eyes met hers in the mirror, what she saw was wonder. You're beautiful, he breathed. I'm branded, she said, her voice shaking. Everyone will know what I am, what I was accused of. Lysander's hand came up to trace the scar gently, his fingers warm against her skin. This mark tells me that you survived something terrible, that you were punished for a crime you did not commit and came through it with your spirit intact. There is no shame in survival, Seraphine, only strength. You don't understand. People will talk. They'll say terrible things. Let them. Lysander turned her to face him, his hands cradling her face. You are my wife, my queen, the mother of my child, the woman who saved my life. Nothing else matters. I was so afraid, she whispered. So afraid you would see me and regret choosing me. Never. His voice was fierce. I chose you in the darkness, and I choose you in the light. Every part of you, every scar, every secret, every beautiful, brave piece. He kissed her then, and it was different from all the kisses that had come before, because this time there were no barriers between them. No veil, no blindfold, no darkness. Just two people loving each other completely, accepting each other fully, choosing each other freely. When they pulled apart, Seraphine rested her forehead against his. I love you, she said. I will love you for the rest of my life, and I love you, Lysander replied, without fear, without reservation, without end. They stood like that for a long moment, hearts beating in sync, breathing together. Then Lysander pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious. There's something you should know about the curse. What? Breaking it didn't just free me, it freed my entire bloodline. Every Frostwind who comes after will be able to love without dying. Our son will not carry this burden. Neither will his children or his children's children. Your father's sacrifice did not just save me. It saved generations. Seraphine felt fresh tears prick her eyes. He would have been happy to know that. Yes, Lysander drew her close again. He died a hero, Seraphine. Whatever else he was, whatever mistakes he made, in the end he chose love over fear. He chose sacrifice over self-preservation. That is how he will be remembered. 6 months later, on a warm day in May, Seraphine stood in the castle gardens watching Alaric take his first steps. The baby was 8 months old now, sturdy and curious and fearless. He let go of the bench he had been holding and took 3 wobbling steps toward his mother before falling onto his bottom with a surprised laugh. Seraphine scooped him up, kissing his chubby cheeks. Such a brave boy, just like your father. Lysander came up behind them, wrapping his arms around them both. And just like his mother, don't forget that part. Seraphine leaned back against her husband's chest, feeling his warmth, his strength, his love surrounding her like sunshine. She no longer wore a veil. The brand on her forehead was visible to anyone who cared to look, and many did. But the whispers had changed. Now they called her the brave queen, the fire queen, the woman who had been wrongly accused and rose to save her kingdom. Isolde approached from the rose garden, a basket of flowers in her arms. She had moved to the castle after their father's death, unable to bear staying at Ashmore Manor alone. Now she spent her days working with orphaned children, teaching them to read and write, giving them the love and attention she herself had always craved. She had found purpose, had found peace, had found a way to transform her pain into something beautiful. Look what I picked for father's grave, she said, showing Seraphine the white roses their father had loved. They're perfect, Seraphine said softly. Celestine emerged from the library, a book in her hands. She had taken up residence in the castle as well, claiming she wanted to be near her grandson, but really just wanting to be near the family she had been forced to abandon so long ago. She looked younger now, lighter. The weight of 20 years of separation had lifted, replaced by joy and purpose. She had become Alaric's primary caretaker when Seraphine had duties to attend to, and she delighted in every moment with her grandson. A servant approached and bowed. My lady, the council is ready to begin. Seraphine handed Alaric to Celestine and brushed a kiss against his forehead. Be good for Grandmama. The council meeting was brief. They discussed trade agreements and harvest reports and the new academy that was being built. An academy for young people with magical gifts, where they could learn to control and use their powers safely. No more hiding, no more shame, no more children branded for the crime of being different. When the meeting ended, Seraphine walked through the castle halls and found herself in the portrait gallery. A new painting had been hung that morning. It showed her and Lysander and Alaric, a family portrait to mark the beginning of their reign together. In the painting, Seraphine's face was uncovered, the brand clearly visible, but her expression was joyful, her eyes bright. She looked like a woman who had survived hell and come out stronger. She looked like a queen. Lysander found her there, standing before the portrait. He slipped his hand into hers. What are you thinking, he asked. About how far we've come, about everything we survived to get here. Regrets? None. She turned to face him. Not a single one. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. Neither do I. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Celestine and Isolde, Esme, who had become a permanent resident, an advisor, and a few close friends. Alaric sat in a high chair between his parents, banging a spoon and laughing at the noise. Lysander raised his glass. To family, to those we've lost and those we've found. To love that survives against all odds. To love, everyone echoed. As Seraphine drank, she looked around the table at these people she loved. Her mother, returned from exile. Her sister, forgiven and redeemed. Her husband, saved from a curse that had haunted his family for generations. Her son, born into freedom. And she thought about her father, buried in the cemetery with white roses on his grave. The man who had hurt her and saved her. Who had destroyed her life and given his own to restore it. Forgiveness had not been easy. Healing had not been quick. But both had been worth it. Because love, real love, was not about perfection. It was about choosing each other despite the flaws. About seeing all the broken pieces and still deciding that the whole was worth fighting for. After dinner, Seraphine took Alaric up to the nursery. She fed him, changed him, sang him the lullaby her mother had taught her. When his eyes finally drifted closed, she stood over his cradle for a long moment, watching him sleep. He would grow up in a kingdom where magic was not feared, but celebrated, where difference was not punished, but honored, where love was not a curse, but a blessing. He would know his grandmother's stories and his aunt's laughter and his father's strength and his mother's courage. He would know he was loved, completely, unconditionally, forever. Lysander appeared in the doorway, his expression soft as he watched his wife and son. "Ready for bed?" he asked quietly. Seraphine nodded and followed him to their chambers. No separate rooms anymore. No cold distance. No pretense that this was just a contract, just an arrangement. They were husband and wife in truth. Partners, lovers, friends. As they lay together in the darkness, Lysander's arms around her, Seraphine thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago. Broken, scared, hiding beneath layers of fabric and shame. That woman was gone now. In her place was a queen, a mother, a fire witch who had learned to control her power and use it to heal instead of harm. A woman who had been marked as damaged and had chosen to see the mark as proof of survival instead of shame. "I love you," Lysander murmured against her hair. "Today, tomorrow, always." "And I love you," Seraphine replied, "for all that you are and all that you've helped me become." Outside, the moon rose over the kingdom. In the nursery, a baby slept peacefully. In the cemetery, white roses bloomed on a grave. In the gardens, spring flowers opened to the night. And in the castle, a king and queen who had been brought together by desperation and contract found themselves bound instead by something far stronger. By choice, by acceptance, by love that had survived curses and brands in every obstacle placed in its path, by the knowledge that they had chosen each other not just once, in a moment of need, but again and again, every day, in 1,000 small ways. And they would continue choosing each other for all the days of their lives, because that was what love was, not the absence of difficulty, not the promise of perfection, but the decision to stay, to fight, to forgive, to grow, to build something beautiful from broken pieces, to look at someone completely, without veils or illusions, and say, yes, you, always you. Seraphine closed her eyes and drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, her hand resting over the place where his heart beat strong and warm and free. The curse was broken, the veil was lifted, and love, patient and powerful and true, had won.